This is Plant-Based Briefing, Everything in Moderation, Wishful Thinking or Wisdom in Action by Nelson Huber-Disla at nutritionstudies.org. And I'm Marian Erickson. This is the Plant-Based Podcast, where I curate a variety of articles on plant-based and vegan living, get permission, and narrate them to you here in about 10 minutes or less every weekday. And I'm pleased to have permission from the Colin Campbell Center for Nutrition Studies to share their content. So now let's get to today's Plant-Based Briefing. Everything in Moderation, Wishful Thinking or Wisdom in Action by Nelson Huber-Disla at nutritionstudies.org. Moderate consumption of unhealthy food and beverages is frequently encouraged as a step in the direction toward better health outcomes. You've likely heard messages reflecting this idea many times from many prominent public health authorities. We're encouraged by dietary guidelines to not drink alcohol, but told that if we do drink, we should practice moderation. We're told to moderate our consumption of foods high in saturated fat because they're associated with various health risks. We're told to drink moderate amounts of caffeine-containing beverages if we choose to drink them at all. It seems like a no-brainer. Given the choice between moderate consumption and unlimited consumption, most people would surely be better off if they at least make an effort to be more moderate. And maybe moderation is even more sustainable, right? As the common expression goes, it's important to know when to leave well enough alone. Maybe instead of constantly striving for perfection, we should be emphasizing more sustainable progress. But these are just thoughts. Is there any proof that a moderate approach to dietary change is truly well enough? No matter how commonsensical, intuitive, and virtuous the advice for moderation might seem, does it work? How do such recommendations land in the mind? How do we apply them to our lives? Do we even know what moderation is? Whose moderation? According to research, the answer to the final question is no, we don't know what moderation is. More often than not, it's a completely subjective goal, and we're generally very poor at judging whether we have achieved it. Your idea of moderation differs not only from mine, but also likely from your own past ideas of moderation, because our definitions of moderation are dynamic and heavily influenced by whatever our current consumption patterns look like. A series of 3 studies published in the journal Appetite showed that definitions of moderation are biased by one's own consumption. In other words, we tend to conveniently view moderation as whatever we already consume, or else a bit more than that amount. For example, someone who regularly consumes more cookies than I do is likely to define moderate consumption as an amount greater than I would. One might suspect that overweight individuals could be especially susceptible to this kind of bias, but when the researchers controlled for weight, they found no evidence to support that idea. It turns out that normal weight individuals' perceptions of moderation are just as likely to be swayed by their preferences. The authors write, endorsement of moderation messages allows for a wide range of interpretations of moderate consumption. Thus, we conclude that moderation messages are unlikely to be effective messages for helping people maintain or lose weight. Okay, but that's for weight loss. Is it possible that moderation messages might effectively support the more important and less superficial health outcomes? I'm skeptical. People are notoriously poor judges of their own consumption patterns, including portion sizes, the caloric content of food, and even the amount of food they've just consumed. Lacking that judgment, they tend to reflect the consumption patterns of those around them, rationalizing whatever seems normal and confirming the behaviors they would rather not change. We all carry these massive blind spots. Survey data on perceptions of health back this up, linked here. As the U.S. Society's standard of health has declined, individuals' ability to assess their own health has become increasingly inaccurate. If we cannot even accurately identify whether or not we are overweight, how well can we expect to identify whether our diets are healthy? Given these empirically established psychosocial shortcomings, what is the more likely outcome of a moderation-centered mindset? That we logically land on truly moderate consumption patterns and reap the health benefits of that moderation, or that we simply use the message to continue justifying our destructive behaviors. More effective moderation. You might be thinking right about now that it seems harsh to dismiss all attempts at moderation. I agree. There must be a more effective way to approach this. How might we learn from some of the concerns outlined above? Number 1, guidelines must be specific and implementable. Moderation need not be subjective and vague. Specific guidelines are essential. And to be fair, public health institutions sometimes do a decent job at this. For example, recommendations to consume moderate amounts of alcohol are usually accompanied by the specific suggestion for women and men to limit themselves to 1 drink or 2 drinks per day, respectively. But specificity isn't always enough. Even specific suggestions are sometimes difficult to visualize and implement. 1 or 2 drinks per day is much easier for most people to conceptualize than the American Heart Association's advice to limit saturated fat intake to 6% of daily calories. That's about 13 grams of saturated fat per day, they write, but tracking that information requires a level of vigilance that many people aren't going to sustain. Number 2, we need more awareness. People who are unaware of the risks associated with their behaviors are less likely to actually practice moderation. We need to understand on some level why moderate intake is better for us than unlimited consumption, and we need to internalize that information. The problem is that public confusion about nutrition is off the charts. The vast majority of people understand and accept that alcohol is unhealthy, but does the same consensus exist for, say, animal products? Clearly not. Does the same consensus exist for subcategories of animal products like red meat? Yes and no. Yes, because the most prominent public health institutions reiterate the importance of limiting consumption of red meat. No, because the public consciousness has not yet achieved that same level of consensus. If it did, fad diets like the carnivore diet would quickly come to occupy a space in the collective imagination similar to that of the flat earth conspiracy. Essentially, we need more awareness of what we are eating and why. This also means a greater understanding of and transparency around ingredients like artificial additives, but most importantly, it means greater nutrition literacy, which is in such short supply these days. Until we achieve that awareness, recommendations that are reasonable, specific, and moderate are likely to be met with resistance. And number 3, we need to be able to cook for ourselves. One of the difficulties of messages promoting moderation is that they are incompatible with how many people commonly consume food. We live in a world of Big Macs, not moderate Macs, a world dominated by 7-patty steak burgers, not nutritionally sane meals resembling what you might find in nature. It's often said that today even the poor eat the diets of kings and queens, but the reality is even worse than that. We are fed a constant stream of calorically dense, hyper-processed foods, the likes of which even King Louis VI, named Louis the Fat for his gluttony, couldn't have possibly imagined. If the call for moderation is going to make any sense at all, we need to break away from that world. Those who have already adopted a whole food, plant-based lifestyle know that this requires basic cooking skills and sometimes a bit of planning. The convenience food era makes the opposite seem so easy and appealing. Why cook when you can just stop at the drive-thru or throw a frozen meal in the microwave? But that convenience carries a surcharge for both your wallet and your health. Check out our cooking classes linked here. Is the whole food plant-based diet incompatible with moderation? This question comes up occasionally. Does a more moderate approach to the plant-based dietary lifestyle work? How perfect do I have to eat in order to reap the benefits? It's something that many people seem to wonder about when they're first beginning to transition to a whole food plant-based diet. Here's what Dr. T. Colin Campbell has written about this subject in a previous article. The closer we get to a 100% whole food plant-based lifestyle, the healthier we will be. It may, however, surprise some to learn that I'm not aware of any verifiable evidence that 100% purity is needed to optimize health for all people at all times. The reason I recommend getting as close to 100% whole food plant-based as possible is that dietary addictions to dietary fat or refined carbohydrates, for example, make it difficult for us to eat only small amounts of unhealthy foods while remaining on the whole food plant-based path. In many ways, it can be easier to transition fully rather than 90%. The presumed benefits of a more moderate approach to lifestyle change are, in some ways, the very same reasons why a more moderate approach might be less likely to succeed. Allowing yourself more flexibility would be great if you could maintain it, but in some situations, that flexibility can be far more difficult than making a complete transition. You just listened to Everything in Moderation, Wishful Thinking or Wisdom in Action by Nelson Huber-Disla at nutritionstudies.org. And I'm your host, Marian Erickson. As always, I put a link to the original post in the show notes. You might want to check that out if you wanted to see some of the sources and studies cited. And I will link one related episode in the show notes as well that you might want to check out. 423, Eating All Things in Moderation Ravaged My Athletic Husband's Arteries. So please share this episode with anyone who might benefit, and thanks for listening.